but basically in television, what we look for are VO material. So here's the breakdown of the entire television show that you watch called the Nightly Newscast.
A VO.
VO is a voiceover. That is the shortest story along with the reader that we have. So when you hear David say, you know, there was a car fire in Van Nuys today that caused a whole apartment building to burn down. Take video. The fire began at 12 o'clock this afternoon, and 50 people had to be evacuated. A child had suffered minor smoke inhalation injuries, but firefighters put that fire out in about an hour. Then they go to his co-anchor. She reads something where she's on camera the whole time. That's a reader. So a VO is something that has video in it that the anchor reads over. A reader is something that the anchor just reads, without any video, because there's no video attached to it, or there's no video that could have been gotten. And those are usually like 20 to 25 seconds long. And then you have what's called a VO-SOT, which is a voice-over sound on tape. So you know that story that I just made up in my mind about the fire? So David stops at one point and goes, firefighters had it out in an hour. Then the firefighter comes up in his video and he's talking and he's like, yeah, it was a really close call. What happened was there was a vent system on the top of the apartment building that created a suction, and that made the fire go all over the place, and that's why it took such a long time. And then David comes back on camera, or there's more video, and he says, anybody who was displaced from this apartment complex is urged to call the Red Cross, and we'll have the number on abc7.com. That is a VO-SOT VO. So that's the second longest story. Then you have what I do, which is called a package. So a reporter pretty much always does a package. I also do live VOs, where I just talk over video, because I don't have any sound. Or I do live VO-SOTs, where I get sound, and it's like a minute long. The package that I do is where I go, and David, these people are lucky to be alive. They take what appears to be an edited piece that's about a minute and a half long. That's what I do. I go, the fire broke out at blah, 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 blah. And, Jean McDonald was in the home when it did, when the fires came blazing into her apartment. And then she goes, I couldn't believe it. And then there's sound from her. And then there's more video. And then there's more sound. And then there's more video. That's what I weave together as a story. So when I do that when I'm at KBC, when I'm at the network, because I also work for NBC News, I do something similar but on a national scale, something that the national audience will appreciate. Because nobody in Utah cares about an apartment fire here in Los Angeles. Although I was sent to the Monte Carlo fire to cover that, which was out in like 20 minutes. But anyway, that's a whole other story. So knowing that, it works to help you if you kind of know what you think this is going to be in a newscast. So you're like, okay, 500 people are having a dinner, but we've got the guy who recently chopped his arm off in Boulder and lived to tell about it coming as a guest. Well, that might be a VO-SOT because he's able to be interviewed, right? But if it's just, he's just going to speak and he's not going to give anybody any opportunities to interview, well, then maybe it's a VO. Then again, if he's coming, and then another guy who 10 years ago also chopped off his arm in order to get away from a boulder while hiking in Utah, well, now you might have a package, because that's like two people with super interesting stories. And so you almost have to keep in mind when you're calling a television station or NBC News or whatever, what it is that you think the reporter or the planning editor or the assignment editor is going to get out of this. So those are some really good terms to have in mind. And also keep in mind that when I do a story, I really don't need to interview more than like 2 to 3 people.